Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Composers at Home, Maybe Drinking Coffee. I will fade out our introductory music here. Hope everybody's having a good day. And well, there I am. So here we are, November, already November. I don't think I have to remind anybody at home that we've had a fairly interesting week in America, but I hope everybody is safe and sound, and maybe this next hour and a half will be a nice welcome reprieve from whatever else is going on. So I'm going to put my name placard down there, as I always forget to do that, but there's my name, Elliot Miles McKinley. And I'm also going to do the ubiquitous social media plug for the show. And there it is. Please like us on Facebook and subscribe to the channel. We appreciate that. We being me. It's always interesting if you do like business stuff or quasi-business things or organizational things. You tend to use the plural rather than the singular. And I am the we in Composers at Home, maybe drinking coffee with the exception of my guests, which now leads me to introducing our guest for tonight. And it's a real pleasure and a real thrill, as it is with all of my guests, to have this gentleman on tonight, Thomas Oboe Lee, who is someone I've known for many, many years, actually. And we have, he's known me consciously more than I've known him consciously, and you'll find that out probably soon enough in the conversation. But also, before I bring Tom into the scene, I am monitoring the live chat, so please comment, say hello, let us know that you're watching and listening, and also please ask questions. One thing that we really like when we do the show, when I do the show, is to field questions, and the composers always enjoy answering questions from you at home. So please say hello, and I hope you will enjoy the next hour and a half with my guest Tom. So without further ado, I will bring in Tom Lee. There he is. Tom, how you doing this evening?
I'm doing great.
Great. And we were talking in the preamble just a little bit. You can see that Tom's scene is framed with there's artifacts behind him, also known as compact discs. And we were saying about how those are sort of going the way of I don't know, the phrase is dinosaur, right? Going the way of the dinosaurs. But I don't even have my CD. We mentioned this. I don't even have CDs anymore. I mean, I do. I have like a small box of them somewhere. But Tom has a nice display. It makes for an interesting backdrop, Tom.
Yeah.
Do you remember, I guess we'll sort of stick on this for a second. Do you remember when you first started buying CDs in lieu of records?
Oh my God. This must be around 1980, maybe?
When they
Maybe
first
around
started?
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I had lots of records. Remember those wooden carts they use for watermelon or something?
Oh,
I
yeah, yeah,
I used to
yeah.
have all my records stacked up on the walls. Just stacked
Wow. And with
one
in the
box after another.
carts. Yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah. What
And
did,
I even had a nice turntable, a Thorns turntable.
oh, yeah. I seem
Yeah.
to remember those as being
Right.
some top of the line stuff from that
Yeah.
period, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, what did you do with all your records? Do you still have any?
Yeah, I still have them. I've got rid of a lot, but some of the iconic ones, the iconic jazz ones, like Miles Davis, Bill Evans, I
Yeah,
still have those on record. John Coltrane.
yeah,
I
yeah.
was definitely in the 80s, I was definitely more into jazz than into classical music.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I
Mm-hmm.
went to NEC, I went there as a jazz major, and that
Right.
was 1972.
Right.
I was in jazz, and of course, as you know, I did many gigs with your dad around town. So
In that
Dad
time
and I
period,
had a
yeah.
band together. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was definitely into jazz in the late 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
then finally, finally at New Conservatory, that's when I started with your dad and Gunther Schuller. Those two turned me around from jazz and started pursuing composition. That all happened around the mid 70s.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah.
This was so I guess Tony Landman. Hey Tony, nice to see you. Thanks for saying hello. Anthony Joseph Landman, he's a composer. He's living in Indiana, a very fine composer, and he actually runs a podcast called One Track Podcast. So and that's I've known Tony for years anyway. Nice to see you on. Let's back up the bus a little bit in this trajectory.
Yeah, sure.
I of course have known you for many years. So as Tom mentioned, he studied with me.
I think I remember you as a toddler.
It would have been. Well,
Yeah.
what it would have been is that you probably would have met my father in 1973 when he came to NEC.
Yes, that's when I met
And
Dad.
and I would have been 4 years old, basically,
Right.
right? So I was probably running around in my underwear and
Yeah, and but you were already banging on the piano. You were already
yes,
improvising.
I remember that vaguely, and I remember, being really interested in the keyboard,
Right. No, you
you
were
know.
on it.
Uh, I and I remember those jam sessions, and I want to talk about some of those jam sessions with like Roger Ryan and stuff, like and some of the sessions that you played with my
Yeah.
dad in those days. But so yeah, everybody knows I've known Tom for many years. But before you came to Boston and came to NEC, and of course I know this, but let's assume that the folks at home don't. You were born in Beijing,
Right.
but emigrated to quite early, correct?
Yeah.
When?
First I went to Hong Kong when the communists took over in 1948,
Mm,
49.
mm-hmm.
We actually left a year later. So we ended up going from Beijing to Hong Kong, I think in 1949, a year later.
Mm-hmm.
But we were definitely refugees. We kind of snuck ourselves out of there.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
then I lived in Hong Kong for 10 years. And that's where I picked up everything in English. Both my parents already spoke English. So they encouraged all the children to go to school where English is the primary, mode of
Language.
study,
Yeah.
language.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was in Hong Kong for 10 years. And then in 1959,
Mm-hmm.
I followed my father with one of my sisters. We ended up in Sao Paulo, Brazil.
Mm-hmm.
So I was in Brazil for 6 years. So I was there during my mid-teens till 20, 21.
Mm-hmm.
So in many ways, I think of myself, my formative years, I would consider those were the Brazilian years. Between the age of 15 and 20, those are your formative
There's a
years.
lot going on there. I mean,
Right.
so many
Yeah.
changes, right?
Exactly. So I was there when the whole bossa nova movement kind of just basically started.
Wow.
So I even got a chance to play with this guy named oh God, what's his name? I'm having a senior moment here.
It's cool. Well, you have a
Chico,
whole other hour to remember,
right?
but yeah.
Chico Buarque de
Oh,
Holanda.
okay.
Chico
Okay.
Buarque. So at that time, he was an unknown kid. He was a college kid, and we did gigs and concerts together, and then he became world famous.
Mm.
So
Mm-hmm.
anyway, so I did a lot of jazz playing at that point.
Yeah.
And then that's also because of the Brazilian thing, we did a lot of Brazilian and jazz things.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
my years in Brazil was basically jazz and basically bossa nova and improvising music.
Mm-hmm.
I actually never really learned to read music well
Yeah.
because in Brazil everybody played by ear.
Yeah. Right. Right. That
Everybody
was.
played by ear. So everybody played by ear. So I would do a gig sometimes, those Brazilians love to dance. I would do a dance gig
Yeah.
from 10 p.m. at night and it goes to 5 in the morning.
Right. Right.
And this was a band of maybe like 8 people in it.
Yeah.
And we did all kinds of charts and everybody played their parts from memory all
Wow.
night. Nobody read.
Wow.
Nobody
Wow.
read.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's impressive, actually.
Yeah.
Considering,
Yeah.
considering the length and breadth
Yeah.
of the
Yeah.
music, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Now, when did you actually first I mean, so obviously sometime between the time you were born and the time that you were playing gigs in Brazil,
Yeah.
You picked up music, right? So
Oh, okay.
what were some of your first memories of music, and what was drawing you as a young person that
Yeah.
direction?
Yeah, that's a good question because I actually did not start playing music until I was in Brazil.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because even though both my parents were professional musicians, they were not classical musicians. They were like they sang in nightclubs.
Okay.
My dad was a singer and dancer, and my mom
Mm-hmm.
was a singer. They met in a nightclub in Shanghai. You
Okay.
know, so they had a nightlife.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I grew up listening to a lot of popular music,
Mm-hmm.
especially American popular music,
Mm-hmm.
since both my parents spoke English.
Mm-hmm.
So I grew up listening to Nat King Cole, Frank Sinatra,
Yeah.
Tony Bennett, all the big standard stuff.
Right.
But
Right.
my parents discouraged us from going to music, mainly because they were both in music, and they said that's no future.
Right. They didn't want
So
you to.
right,
Right.
right. So I did not have any real lesson playing until I was in Brazil. And there was something, this might be interesting to the people.
Mm-hmm.
When I followed my father from Hong Kong to Brazil, we took kind of a long trip on an ocean liner that
Mm-hmm.
started in Japan
Mm-hmm.
and ended up in Brazil. And
Mm-hmm.
on the boat were a lot of young Japanese people, Japanese men,
Mm-hmm.
because in Japan, as you know, is a tiny island.
Yeah.
So if a Japanese family who's a farmer have, let's say, three sons, the
Mm-hmm.
number one son inherits the farm.
Yeah.
Number two and three, well, you're on your own, man.
That's it. You're just
Yeah,
you came late. Yeah.
right. So these two, the one of two sons will have to find some other way of pursuing a career.
Mm-hmm.
So, and apparently Brazil and Japan had a deal that if you send your young men to Brazil, we'll provide them with a plot of land so they can be
Oh,
farmers.
wow.
Mainly
Okay.
because they really trusted that the Japanese were more efficient as farmers than the Brazilians. I won't go into that. I won't go
Right,
into
right, 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 right. Okay. That's it.
but the Japanese were so good in farming in Brazil that during World War II, when the Brazilian government tried to inter,
Yeah.
the Japanese here in the U.S.,
Yeah. Yeah.
they tried to put them in concentration camps or whatever. Well, what happened was the street market was devoid of fruits and vegetables.
Like suddenly there was nothing there.
Right. So
Yeah.
the government said, all right, go back to your farm and give us food.
Yeah. Wow.
True. That's
Wow.
a
It was
story.
that's significant to the
Yeah.
food supply. Wow.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, so I was in Brazil because of that. And
Mm-hmm.
it was on the boat. And this is the reason why I brought it up. On the boat, I saw three young Japanese men who constantly came up to the deck. One guy was a karate practitioner. So he
Mm-hmm.
was up there working out. And after he gets himself all buffed up, he'll
Mm-hmm.
say to anybody, all right, here, punch my stomach.
No.
So one guy was that.
Yeah.
And the other two guys, one played the clarinet
Mm-hmm.
and one played the trumpet, and they were both jazz musicians.
Mm-hmm.
So they were up on deck practicing bebop licks.
Yeah. Yeah.
So here I am at the age of 15 or whatever, and I was just observing these guys practicing, and it made such a huge impression on me
Wow.
that when I got to Brazil, I said I need to play an instrument. So that was the trigger that got me started in
That's
music.
wow. That's
Yeah.
so it's amazing how like one thing in life
Yes.
that would seem very transient, right?
Yeah.
It's basically, you're on a boat for,
Yeah.
a couple weeks or
48
whatever.
days.
Yeah, 48.
48.
Oh, wow. Okay. A lot more. Yeah.
48 days.
So, a lifetime on a boat.
Yeah.
But something like that literally changed your life,
Right. Right.
right? The course of your life.
Elliot, you and I experienced that as professors in college.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, we get one kid, their eyes lit up, and
Mm-hmm.
they had an epiphany.
Yeah.
And basically, we changed their lives.
Right. Right. And it's that moment. You can
Yeah,
see that
right.
moment happen, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a great profession we're in.
It is. It is. So we can complain about our first world job all we want, but but it's still a first world job. So you get to Brazil, and So was that when you picked up the flute, or did you pick up
Yeah.
another instrument? Okay.
First I picked up the clarinet.
Okay.
And this is another cute story. You're gonna love this. Okay, as I said, one of the guys on the boat was a clarinet player,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, and also I grew up listening to Benny Goodman, Artie Shaw from my dad's record collection. You know, my dad loved jazz. We listened to Oscar Peterson, you know, Errol Garner, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Probably the same stuff that your dad played, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I always admired Benny Goodman. At that time, there was that movie, I think Steve Allen played Benny Goodman in this movie. It was like the Benny Goodman story.
Yeah, right,
Steve Allen was he actually looked somewhat like Benny Goodman.
Yeah, yeah.
So I've always wanted to play the clarinet for that reason. So after meeting this Japanese guy on the boat, I said, "Oh wow, that would be cool." But what happened was, what do Chinese people do when they're in a foreign country? Now I don't want to stereotype people, but that was my experience, and is that we end up working at a Chinese restaurant. So that's what I did.
Yeah.
I washed dishes.
Yeah.
My sister was a waitress because she's a woman, you know.
Yeah.
It's very stereotypical.
Right. But this is
then my dad was the host. You know, he took people to the tables.
Okay. All right.
So,
yeah.
So because of my work in a restaurant, you know, after hours we would go visit other people who are in the restaurant business.
Right.
And one time I met this other restaurant, this young man came up to me and said, "Oh, I heard that you love music." I said, "Yeah, I do." He said, "You know, I have a clarinet. If you want, I'll give it to you because now I'm playing the saxophone." You know, back in the old days, before you can play saxophone, you
play clarinet. Yeah, right, right.
Kind of a stupid thing because the fingering on clarinet and saxophone is totally different.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
but that was always seemed to be the progression.
Yeah,
yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's a progression. Yeah. So the guy gave me his clarinet. So that's how I got started. I was playing clarinet, but basically by year. Yeah. Because I just want to play with a record. I put on a Benny Goodman record.
And you just play to the record.
Yeah, play with a record.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's how I got my chops up, so to speak.
Yeah.
And then in the neighborhood, I met some kids who were also interested in music. So I would go to their house like once a week and we'll have a jam session. And we play like, you know, Brazilian tunes, jazz tunes, standards.
Yeah.
So after a year, I started gigging. So that's how it started.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, you know, that's you know, there's no better way to do it than just to do it. Right?
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Sometimes you just do it, right?
Right. And then I finally switched to the flute because the whole bossa nova thing was not really aimed toward the clarinet as much, you know.
Right.
So the flute was more into it, so I switched to the flute. So that's what
that prompted that, right? Sure. Right. So here you are. You're in Brazil, and you're developing your facility as a player, and you know, really kind of learning essentially on the job, more or less, right?
And playing everything by ear. Because I hardly read anything.
Right. So I mean, that's a bookmark thing, because I often think about like the very act of you having done that, like playing to records and then also just going to gigs and just learning the tunes and then having to play them and then having to improvise and this sort of thing is like, I mean, talk about ear training practice.
Oh yeah,
right?
Definitely.
Developing your ear and cultivating your sense of things and textures and stuff. Right. I mean, I can't imagine that wasn't invaluable to you later as a composer. And you know, not just, you know, as a player. Well, we'll talk about that later when we talk about sort of like you know. So then, what was the next thing? So here you graduate from high school. Your secondary education there is 18 till 18, right?
Yeah. Well, let's backtrack a little bit. In Brazil, the public schools, there were few public schools. So in order to get into public school, you actually have to take a test.
Oh, okay.
You have to qualify. It's not like here in the U.S.
You just go to it.
Yeah. You go because the taxpayers paid for all the high school education. You know, it's free.
Yeah.
Down there, sure, the public schools are free, but you have to take an exam to get it.
Okay.
Since I'm new in the country, I hardly spoke Portuguese.
Yeah,
I
right.
did not take any course before I came to Brazil.
Yeah.
So that was out of the question.
Mm-hmm.
So for 3 years, I was basically working doing dishes. And and then eventually I started gigging these friends of mine. So I
Mm-hmm.
started doing gigs to the point where I was able to give up my restaurant job and just gig.
Oh,
So
yeah.
yeah. So I was with this band, as I said, there were like 8 people in the band. We would hop into a van
Mm-hmm.
and we would go, suppose, let's say Boston is our base. We would take a bus, take our van, go to Springfield, do a gig at 5 o'clock in the morning. We drive back.
Yeah, right.
Then we'll go to Portland, Maine.
And do another gig.
Yeah, do another gig like
Right.
Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday.
Yeah.
So every weekend we were booked
Wow.
doing these dances from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it, like you said, it definitely got my chops up,
Yeah.
so I could play, from memory, all kinds of stuff. So I did that for 3 years. And then eventually I said, I don't want to spend the rest of my life doing these one night gigs, one night stands here and
Right,
there.
because you started realizing that as
Right.
fun as it was for a little bit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. So then I decided that I need to go back to school. So I got myself a tutor
Mm-hmm.
to teach me Portuguese. And because I was making enough decent money, I actually paid myself to go to high school in a private school.
Uh-huh.
Oh, I did that for the last 3 years. So
Yeah.
I was in Brazil for 6.
Yeah.
So 3 years without school, and then 3 years back with school. So by the time I came to the U.S., I'll explain how I got to the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
What happened was, put that education thing aside.
Sure.
My mother, as I said, I went to Brazil with my father.
Mm-hmm.
My mother, in the meantime, ended up in New York City through a company she worked for.
Yeah.
So my sister was in touch with my mother, and my sister was very unhappy. She's being a waitress. She was not going to school.
Mm-hmm.
I was able to go to school because I was making some money. So she was very unhappy. So she wrote to my mother and said, get us out of here,
Yeah.
So my mother by then remarried, and through his help,
Mm-hmm.
they flew us from Brazil to, by that time they moved to Pittsburgh. So they moved so I flew from Brazil to Pittsburgh. And that was 6 years afterwards. Okay, then I got sidetracked. What was I talking about before? Why I was, 3 years.
The education, 3 years, right.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So by the time I got to Pittsburgh, I was already age 21 and I hadn't finished high school. So my mother went to the high school in Monroeville, Pennsylvania, and said, my son, he's behind in school. Can he start? So I spent my senior year, age 21, at Monroeville High School.
Talk about an old senior, man.
I know.
You must have been that you were the man on campus.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
So anyway, I was there for 1 year, and then after that, the second year I was here in the States, I started going to University of Pittsburgh.
Okay.
So I was at Pittsburgh for my undergraduate.
Okay.
And all along this time, I was gigging.
Yeah.
Doing weddings, doing jazz gigs, doing anything that came around.
Right. Just playing the whole time. Wait, when you were doing your undergrad, did you focus on music or were you doing something else?
No, yeah, my mother, being a typical Chinese mother, said,
Pragmatic.
Music, forget it.
Right.
It's either engineering or she said engineering. So I said, engineers, I don't want to walk around with a slide rule down on my belt. Those are the slide rule days,
Yeah, right.
So I made a compromise. I said, okay, what about pre-med? She said, okay, fine. So I was pre-med for 3 years at University of Pittsburgh, majoring in chemistry. And then again, serendipity. I sort of believe in serendipity.
Sure.
In my third year, the University of Pittsburgh hired a very well-known jazz musician named Nathan Davis.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Nathan Davis.
Yeah.
And Nathan Davis' story is very interesting. When the rock and roll scene took over in the US, he escaped to Paris and he made a career there playing jazz. And then University of Pittsburgh hired him back to the U.S. And so when the music department hired him, I said, "Oh, I'm gonna become a music major."
Right. Gonna do
Because
this.
of the jazz thing, you know.
Yeah. Right.
So
Right.
even until then, classical music was totally not in my realm of thinking.
Yeah.
It was all jazz.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
That's when I switched to music.
And how'd your mother take that?
Oh, okay, good story. Because by then, again, like in Brazil, by then I was gigging enough that I had my own apartment.
So you
So
were
yeah, I was self-sufficient. So I said to Mom, "Hey, I'm not asking money from you, so you should let me do whatever I want since I can support myself."
Right. Right. Yeah.
So that's how I got away.
Right. And you know, you were making, I mean, back then too, it was easier to make money if you could play and you were willing to take the gigs.
Yeah, well,
you could do
I
it.
did weddings, I did all kinds of, what they call, general business.
The GB gigs, right?
Yeah, GB gigs.
Right, right.
Oh.
So you graduated from UPitt, and then that's when you
that's
jumped
when
to
I
NEC.
came to New York Conservatory. Yeah, that was in 1972. Now I came here also talking about serendipity.
Yeah. Life is full of those moments.
Yeah, life is full of those. And you know how the latest thing is that life is a crapshoot. You're lucky, you get ahead because you're lucky.
Right, right.
Luck has to do a
lot to do with it. Yeah.
Yeah. So what happened was in the last 3 years of University of Pittsburgh, because I got involved with the jazz program with Nathan Davis, and I was doing jazz gigs all over. And then I found out that Notre Dame University had a jazz festival, like a collegiate jazz festival. So for the last 3 years I was at University of Pittsburgh, I took a band, kids I played with on campus, and I convinced the university to fund us to go there to compete at the festival.
Oh, wow.
So so the university gave us a van, and I got a friend to drive the van, gave us money to stay at a motel.
Yeah.
So we did that for 3 years. And for 3 years, I came out the best jazz flutist award. And you know why? Because I was the only flute player.
You ran unopposed.
Exactly.
It's a good way to win.
Every year I won best jazz flutist.
Right.
Because there was nobody else playing jazz flute.
Right.
Anyway, the third year I was there, one of the judges was George Russell.
There you go, George.
So afterwards, I went up to him. I said, I'm thinking about going to grad school, and I know that NEC has a grad program in jazz, and I'm thinking I want to apply. And he said, "Go ahead, man. I'm with you." So with his encouragement, I applied, and I got into the program. But as you know, NEC doesn't have any scholarship money.
Right.
They don't have it then. They don't have it
no
now.
money.
No money. So you're on your own.
Right.
So I wrote to them. I said, "Well, thank you for accepting me, but I cannot afford to come to Boston. I don't have any money.
Right.
I'm just gigging.
Right.
Like club dates and weddings.
Yeah.
So the week after, I got a phone call from NEC, and I hear this secretary's voices. This is the president's office. Presidents. I said, "What president?" I thought it was the White House.
Right. You're thinking, who's calling you, right?
Then come on the phone. It was Gunther.
Oh, wow. Gunther called you.
Phone. Yeah. Gunther's first line, typical Gunther. He doesn't waste time.
No, he gets right to the point.
"Why aren't you coming? Why aren't you coming?" I said, "Well, I don't have any money. You guys have not offered me any scholarship. I cannot afford to come." Then he said to me, "Well, I listened to your tape. Those are the cassette days.
Cassette days, right? Yeah.
Yeah. He said, "I listened to your tapes, and I think you should come here because it'll be good for you." I said, "Okay." Then he said, "Okay, I'm going to make you a deal. I'll give you a scholarship for 1 year. Then afterwards, you're on your own. I know you do a lot of gigs in Pittsburgh. So if you're in Boston for 1 year, you can make some connections and start gigging after a year." I said, "Well, that's an offer I cannot refuse." So that's how I came.
That's how you came. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then a year later, Gunther hired your dad.
Yep.
73.
Yep.
I was at there 72.
Yeah. Wow. Talk about a trifecta there. You know, you've got George Russell who hears you, and it's basically probably was George that went to Gunther and said, we need to get, we need to get this guy, right?
Yeah,
And then
right,
Gunther,
right.
gets you on the phone and basically then offers you this deal, right? Come to NEC,
Right, yeah,
and at that time,
yeah.
NEC was always and still is this kind of hub of energy, right? But I can
Yeah.
just imagine what kind of energy was going on there in the early 70s, when you
Oh
had
my
people
God.
like Gunther was there, and you had
Right.
my
Rand
dad,
Blake,
you had
yeah,
Rand Blake who was
yeah,
there,
right,
George,
right. And
was Carl Atkins the chair?
Carl was a chair.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I did a lot of gigs with Carl with your dad playing piano in it,
Mm-hmm.
you
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
Well, the other thing great about NEC those years was Gunther would conduct the symphony orchestra. And let me tell you, man, those concerts were mind-blowing, you know. He in the 4 years that I was there, he did he did Wozzeck concert version
Mm-hmm.
on stage. He did Guru Leader, and he did Erwartung, and he
Yeah.
did all kinds of, the early
Oh, the
Schoenberg,
the Schoenberg period. Yeah, right.
Schoenberg here. And he would do Webern, and he would conduct Webern like maybe the concerto, and then he said, "All right, that was kind of short. Let's do it again so you can hear it again." And he would do it again, and that was fabulous.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
was fabulous.
yeah, yeah.
It was those 4 years at NEC were. That's what those were very formative years for me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Talk,
Yeah,
talk about epiphany.
yeah, yeah. I can only imagine like what that scene was like. And the jazz scene in Boston, I mean, that was so you obviously did come to Boston, and you found yourself gigging pretty soon,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, as a matter of fact, I did a lot of gigs with Gunther's son,
Yep.
Ed Schuller,
Yep.
and the
George, drummer,
George was still a
younger.
kid.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right. Yeah,
he was like 12 years old when I
right.
met.
Right.
Yeah, so I did a lot of gigs with Ed Schuller, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And the other person who did a lot of gigs, he sort of became famous at the Tonight Show.
Oh,
Ed
Anton Fig.
Fig, yeah,
Yeah,
Anton
yeah,
Fig.
yeah. Yeah. My dad would when Anton got that gig, my dad would says, "Oh, there's Anton."
I know, exactly,
Right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, another guy that was great at during that time was a pianist named Alan Pasqua.
Yep. Alan Pasqua.
Alan
Yeah.
Pasqua.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway,
Wow. So, now were those 4 years? Now you mentioned Gunther conducting the symphony orchestra. So obviously
right,
you were checking out
right,
the classical scene.
right.
Was that so? What was the slippery slope that sort of got you into
Okay,
this mess of being a
right,
composer, right?
right. Okay, that's a good story. Well, as I said, 4 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
4 years because I ended up doing two master's degree at New England Conservatory. So the first master's was in jazz, and the second was in composition.
Mm-hmm.
What happened was um, during the first year, I took classes with Jackie Byard. He was
Oh yeah,
there.
Jackie, right, right. Mm-hmm.
Carl Atkins, George Schuller. And on weekends, on Fridays, and this was amazing. On Fridays, Thad Jones and Mel Lewis
Oh
will
wow.
come to NEC and give master
Oh
classes.
man.
And that was
Talk
amazing.
talk about what a I'd love
Yeah.
to have been a fly on the wall in those master
And
classes.
that was when Thad Jones and Mel Lewis was still doing the Monday Village Vanguard gigs.
Yeah.
Because I went down to New York to check them out. It
Mm-hmm.
was like standing room only
Yeah.
at the Village Vanguard
Yeah.
every Monday night. And the thing about Thad Jones, which is wonderful, is that when we will say, wow, that voicing you did in that particular piece, he actually doesn't really have a method of his orchestration. What he did is that he sat down on the piano. He has his huge hands. He
Yeah.
sat down on the piano and played the chord and said, "Fuck, that's the sound." So we say to him, hold the fingers down. I want to write it down.
Yeah.
Because he actually didn't know what the hell he was doing. But he played it. And
Yeah.
you said, there's that sound.
And that was it.
That was it.
Wow.
It was we actually hung out more afterwards, go to his hotel room and get drunk or something. That was the best part.
Well, it's, this is all part of education,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Right? It's
exactly.
all part of the education. So, all right, so that's the first year you got that
Oh yeah,
activity, and then
yeah.
the second
Okay, the
year, of
second
course.
year, second year things changed. Second year, then while I was there, first year, I took some other theory courses. I took a Schenkerian course
Mm-hmm.
with Ernst Oster.
Mm.
He's one of the biggies of
Mm-hmm.
Schenkerian analysis. I took that course, and that kind of blew my mind. And then I took a course with Robert Kogan,
Yeah, Bob.
and
Yeah.
that kind of blew my mind because it dealt with tone colors.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I started seeing, and then I took a seminar with Gunther the spring semester of the first year. And the course was called Advanced Compositional Techniques for Jazz Composers. That was literally the title.
Wow.
Advanced Compositional
What
Technique
company
for
for
Jazz
jazz
Composers.
composers? Right now, by the way, as a parenthetical note, Tom, you'll appreciate this. The registrar's office right now won't let you do a title like that. They'll tell you, no, it's got to be 16 characters or whatever it is, right?
Yeah, well, it's Gunther. It's
Yeah,
Gunther.
right.
So I took that course. There were only 3 people in it,
Mm-hmm.
and you're gonna laugh. There were 3 people. There was me, the Asian guy, and there was this white dude named Tom Boris,
Tom, of course.
who
Tom,
ended
yeah.
up running the jazz program at NYU.
NYU, yeah.
Right. And then there was an African American guy. So there were 3 of us. So with Gunther. And the thing is, we met Gunther every Thursday from 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock in his office.
Wow.
That blew my mind. And Gunther's mind.
Yeah.
It's like encyclopedic.
Yeah. Everything is in there.
Yeah, he would look at a Stockhausen. We were looking at Stockhausen's grouping, the piece with 3 orchestra.
Mm-hmm.
And he would sing every note of this chord. Jesus. So yeah,
you must have been thinking like, oh shit, I really need to get my ear training together, right?
So in that course, which met once a week, we looked at Elliott Carter, we looked at Ives, we looked at Schoenberg, of course, and basically analytical stuff of 20th century scores.
Yeah.
So every time I walked out of that class, I felt like 2 inches off the ground.
Yeah.
I was buzzing.
Wow.
So that's what made me decided that I want to be a composer.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to put down jazz. I still love jazz. I listen to jazz all the time.
Of course.
But jazz musicians, after a while, the stylistic constraints, it's a little bit confining.
Yeah.
Like you got to play those bebop licks at quarter equal 200, and you got to play in all 12 keys. After a while, that is not very creative. I don't find that creative. I find that more like just grunge.
Yeah.
So at the end of that seminar with Gunther, he said, "Okay, your final is to write a string quartet." I said, "Okay." So that string quartet that I wrote in that class became my opus 1. The following year, then that summer was when your dad showed up, and then I met your dad, and we started gigging together. And then I said, "Here we are. I got two reasons why I should switch out of jazz into composition." So even though I was still in the jazz program, I started studying with the dad composition. So with him, I wrote some other pieces. And then the following spring, I had the string quartet performed by the principal chairs of Gunther's orchestra. And I had to conduct because, I was trying to be Elliott Carter.
Oh, I see. With all the
metric
fancy
modulations.
Right.
So I had to conduct because there was no way. And let me tell you, the first rehearsal, I gave the downbeat and I said, "Oh my God." I had this grin on my face. I said, "Did I write that?"
Yeah. Yeah, right. You had that moment of realizing that
Right.
what you wrote was coming back at you.
Right. And then for the
Right.
first time I heard it, but this is before MIDI days, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, yeah. Before you
This
can,
is before.
yeah, yeah,
This is like I was using my imagination, and I'm not a pianist, so
yeah.
I cannot really play. I just sort of intuitively wrote the stuff down.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and then when I heard it, I said, "Oh my God!"
Yeah, yeah. And that became a thing that you,
Yeah,
uh, well, it's
what I
intoxicating.
wanted to pursue.
And it is. So for those who are watching at home and who might not be composers, there is a kind of, it's a kind of a cerebral and emotional intoxication that happens when you hear your music, sometimes for the first time. And also, when you mentioned about the imagination part, what I find really kind of exciting and also validating is when your imagination is matching what you're hearing,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
What you heard in your mind's
Right. Yeah, yeah.
ear
Right.
is coming, is kind of being realized,
Right.
right, in actual time. So,
Right. Following up what you just said, and this is connected to maybe something you were going to talk about. Coming from a jazz background, coming from an improviser's background, where you're on a stage, the trumpet player finished his chorus, it's
mhm.
you. You got to play. There's no such thing as writer's block.
There's nothing
You're
like,
on.
no, man, I'm gonna lay out
Right,
this chorus
right,
because I
exactly.
can't.
Right, exactly. There's no writer's block. You're on, man. Just play your damn instrument.
Right.
I feel that training makes a huge difference for my composing ideas and imagination
Mm-hmm.
because you got to write it down, man.
Yeah.
What are you hung up about? Just write the damn thing down.
Right. Right. Write it down.
Write down what you're hearing. I hear this thing, write it down.
Right. Right. And that's you know, you mentioned earlier, a few minutes ago, about sort of kind of the limitations of jazz in terms of maybe some stylistic,
Yeah,
constraints,
yeah,
right? And it's interesting because I think that I think part of that is due to kind of that historicity of jazz as an art form, but also sometimes that people and people tend to think of jazz as a sort of panoply of sort of sub styles, right? And so
yeah,
if you walk outside of that, it becomes
yeah.
an uncomfortable experience.
Right,
Now, if you're it's different if you're like Miles, who basically never stood still and kept pushing, right?
right,
He kept questioning what
right,
jazz, could be, right, for him.
right, right.
And Bill Evans actually turned that question around. I don't know if you know the you can find it on YouTube, the video of the creative mind of Bill Evans. It's like from 1965, and it's he and his brother Harry
Right,
talking,
right, right,
and it's really fascinating.
right.
But
I noticed that in that video, Bill had bad teeth.
oh yeah, yeah, he had very bad. You're right. You're right. He had very bad teeth. Poor Bill. I'm sure the habit didn't help the teeth.
No,
That probably
no,
didn't help his gums.
no.
Uh,
Anyway,
but
sorry.
yeah, no, it's a. I actually noticed that because I played it for my jazz kids the other day,
Yeah,
and I was like, hey, well, but Bill turned that around and said,
right,
well, I mean, maybe like the music of the 17th century could be characterized as jazz
yeah,
because he thought of jazz as basically the act of creating music in the moment,
right,
right? And so that means it could be sort of divorced, if you will, from kind of like you said, the conventions of like, hey man, you got to play those bebop licks, or
right.
you have to do that two, throw those two fives in
Yeah,
on the turnaround or whatever it might be. But I think that's when you think about, like, say someone like Keith Jarrett or even Chick, or Herbie for that matter, you see them like they push the envelope in terms of what they they know and what they've experienced and what they do in terms of the jazz world, but but you see each of them trying to push past that in terms of opening up that creative door, right? And they do dabble in composition, even though it's outside of Keith. Chick has got some pieces and whatever, but they don't really sort of cross that threshold to become sort of full-time composers, if you will. And, because of that, I think there's only so many hours in the day.
Right.
Right. And so to maintain your chops at that level,
right,
requires a certain number of hours a day to practice. And then that's hours that you aren't composing. Right.
Right.
And my dad had that same problem, the same issue, right? Because he was also very gifted as a jazz pianist.
Oh yeah, he's amazing.
And could play, hold his own at that level with top players. And at the time you met him, he was.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah. But when he got older, he realized he needed to invest more to keep his stamina, right? And he didn't want to keep playing all those gigs. And so he decided by the time early 80s, he decided to sort of go more full-time in terms of composing, even though he never stopped playing ever.
Right. Yeah.
And so your decision was you just decided, hey, I'm not abandoning jazz in terms of my love and appreciation of the art form, but rather I'm going to focus all my energies are going to be focused in the art of expressing myself through composition.
I actually have a more mundane reason.
Okay.
I have a more mundane reason.
And here I was being very flowery about the whole thing. Sounded good.
I have a very mundane reason.
Yeah.
Well, I still play jazz when I teach jazz harmony and improv at Boston College.
Mm-hmm.
So I play there, and every fall I would give a jazz concert, and I'll have people like John Lockwood on bass,
right,
and Brad Hatfield on piano, whatever. Okay, my reason of abandoning jazz, I hate to practice. That's the real reason. As a composer, the people I hired to play my music, they gotta practice.
They have to practice, right, a lot, right?
A lot, because if they don't practice, I say, "What's the matter with you? I'm paying you. Get your chops up." So there's a more mundane reason. I'm too lazy to practice.
Right. Okay. Well,
too lazy to practice. Giant steps. At whatever.
Right. At quarter note equals 270 or whatever it is. Right. You have to play through all those complicated changes. Exactly. It does take a lot to be good.
Yes.
Just to be good.
Yes.
I'm not even talking about to be great.
Yeah. Yes.
Right. And you and I both know that when you know music at a certain level, you know how much work it takes just to be adequate.
Yes.
Right. As a performer, especially.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, there's a certain calculus. I mean, to your point, to spin your point a bit, to your calculus, you made the calculation that, hey man, if I'm just going to be good at what I do, that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Because you know what it takes to be good, right?
Yeah.
So I do want to play some music, but before we do that, I know that you went somewhere after NEC.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So when I was NEC, at that time, I was married to a nurse, so she was working at Mass General Hospital, and and I was basically going to NEC. And I said, I really need to contribute to the household, in terms of finance, things like the rent and things like that. So that's when I decided that I went to Berklee College of Music and said, hey, could you use a teacher? And at that time, things were much more open then. They said, sure. And I said, I've never taught before. They said, that's fine. So I've never taught before. Yeah. So I started at Berklee in 1973. And I was teaching, and because that was the time I started composing, and I took counterpoint and harmony in undergraduate, but I never really took it that seriously. I just did the homework and I didn't really know it, upside down. So I said to the chairman of the composition department, I said, what I'd really like to do is teach harmony, counterpoint, form analysis, because those are the stuff I need to be a composer. I
Right.
needed the grounding, the foundation.
Right.
So that's what I did. So at Berkeley,
Yeah.
the only thing I did jazz was I taught jazz flute.
Okay.
But all my other courses was harmony, counterpoint, form analysis.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Those 3 courses are still the things that I teach at Boston College.
Right.
And
Right.
those things never get tired.
Yeah. Yeah.
Knowledge and foundation in that tonality, 1451, man. Everything's 1451 in the substitution. So I spent Berkeley 6 years teaching that.
Mm-hmm.
So got to a point where I'm really good at it now.
Yeah.
So that's how I got into teaching.
Yeah.
And then once I finished my master's at NEC with my 2 masters, I decided that, in order to get a college teaching job, which is something I would prefer,
Mm-hmm.
I need a PhD.
Mm-hmm.
So the first year I applied to Yale and Harvard, and I didn't get into either of them. And second year I applied again. This time I got into Harvard.
Okay.
So in the year off, I worked at Berkeley full time.
Okay.
Yeah. So in 1977, I ended up at Harvard. And the reason I got in this time was because Leon Kirshner was on sabbatical. Because the first year I had an interview with Leon, and he said, all right, he opened a book and it was Beethoven. He says, all right, play that. I said, but I'm not a pianist.
Yeah.
He said, all right, end of interview.
And that was it.
Me out. That was it.
Wow.
He kicked me out. That was it.
Wow.
The second year, it was Earl Kim who was there.
Yep.
Because Leon was gone, because his opera was being premiered by the New York, what is that? New York City Opera.
Yeah, New York City Opera Company.
It was that. Henderson, the Rain King.
Okay.
It was a book. Anyway, his opera.
Yeah.
And so he was not in town, and I had an interview with Earl Kim, and Earl was fine. He didn't care whether I played the piano, so he accepted me. So
Okay.
that's how I went to Harvard and got my PhD, and then got the PhD. So now I'm teaching college.
Now you're teaching, right? Because you have the requisite piece of paper.
Right. Exactly.
Right. And meanwhile, while you're doing this, and then well, actually, your gig at BC, that did not come on the heels of that, because you did a lot of other things in the 80s. I know you went to Rome, of course.
Yeah. What happened is that it was then as it is now. Every time there's a job opening, there's like 200 applications.
Right.
And everybody has a PhD,
Right.
Everybody's qualified. Everybody's got teaching experience.
Mm-hmm.
So I got my PhD in 1981. I did not get a full-time job at Boston College until 1991. So I spent 10 years all over the place. I taught at Duke. I taught at Swarthmore College. I taught at MIT. I taught at NEC.
Yeah.
You as a
I remember
student.
that.
So I taught at 4 different places part-time for like 10 years before I finally landed a full-time job. And once again, talk about serendipity. The reason I got the job at BC is because the woman who was a graduate student at Harvard, I was her TA in one of her intro to music course.
Okay.
And then she became chair of the music department at Boston College. So I contacted her and said, is there any job there? She said, as a matter of fact, I'm interviewing people right now. Why don't you send in your resume? And that's how I got my job. Because you know somebody.
Just because you know somebody. And that's a very common trope, is that you will, and it happens. And for those at home who think who are mortified by that, that's normative, right? Because you're more likely, that isn't, I mean, obviously, the point is, of course, Tom, you had to bring the goods. You couldn't. You had to have you had to know what you were doing and be able, what you did. By this time, you had been teaching for a long time, so you could walk into a classroom and do that, right? And you had a lot of experience, composer. You had a lot of, at this time, you had some recognition, I know that the Rome experience was very important to you.
Right.
That was 86, right?
Yeah, 86, 87. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
Um,
the story behind that, and this is something else, encouragement or word of support for young composers.
mm-hmm,
The Rome thing, I applied for it 5 years in a row. And the last 3 years, I was a finalist.
mm-hmm.
And when I finally got it, and this is a great story, is that there was somebody on the panel who was a good friend of mine, Steve Jaffe at
Oh,
Duke
yeah,
University.
Steve, yeah.
Right. So he was on the panel. And that was one positive for me. I got somebody who I knew very well, and we were
Mm-hmm,
very supportive of each other.
mm-hmm.
So he was on a panel, and the other three, one was Hugo Weisgau,
Okay.
and the other one was Elliot Carter, and then the third one was John Adams, but the wrong John Adams, not the one.
John
Right.
Luther.
Yeah, John Luther.
Yeah.
What happened was they told the secretary or whatever, say, get John Adams on the panel. So he looked through the Rolodex.
And they found the first John Adams.
They found John Luther Adams rather than the one from San Francisco.
Yeah, yeah.
No, because at that point, John Luther he's not as famous as today, right? Today he's got Pulitzer Prize and all that.
Right.
He's found a whole new genre of music and everything.
Right.
Back then, he was nobody.
Yeah.
So he probably didn't say a damn thing during the committee meeting, the panel meeting.
Yeah, right.
So here's something that Steve Jaffe told me afterwards. Hugo Weisgau piped up and said, this Lee guy, he's in his 40s. I was like maybe 42 then.
Mm-hmm.
He said, that's a little bit old for the Rome Prize. And you know what? Elliot Carter piped up. He says, I got a Rome Prize when I was 46. So that shut Hugo Weisgau up.
So that
and I won it.
And you got it. Okay.
Again, it's who you know. It's a crapshoot. Life's a crapshoot.
Right. It is. And
it's all luck. It's all luck.
It's all, well, the one thing is that it's luck, but you have to also have the goods when the luck happens.
Yeah, right.
Right. So that's an important secondary thing. You actually do have to work very hard, and then when the luck happens, you have to be able to do whatever it is that, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
But you still need luck.
But you still need luck, and that is true.
You could be a genius at what you do, but if you don't get found at the right time by the right person in the right place, it's never going to happen.
Yeah.
So ultimately, it's luck.
Yeah. Which is true. We do have some comments. I know some comments rolled in while we were talking, and then we'll play some music.
Okay.
So Andy Jaffe has come on and says, hi, Elliot and Tom. This is really fascinating. So great to hear your biography, Tom. It is actually about 9 a.m. here in Taipei, so soon I have to go out, but I hope this will be archived so I can watch later. Love this show, and what a great way to reconnect. And he also said, yeah, Nathan Davis, he retired, I think. Great man.
Yeah.
And then Tony Landman, who's also watching, says, wow, Kirshner sounds like a dick.
He was.
Right. Punked.
But R.I.P. Rest in peace.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a friendlier story about my interview at Yale, and I got accepted to Yale 92, and I actually ended up going to Michigan. But my version of that was there was good cop, bad cop, because it was Marty Bresnik and his son plays percussion. He was at Yale, big composer. Now my brain is, of course, going to fail me now. Help me, Tom.
I know what you mean, but it doesn't. Daniel something.
Jacob Druckmann. Danny Druckmann is the percussion. Yeah. So Jacob, it was Jacob Druckmann, and it was Marty Bresnik. And I was going for my master's, so just after NEC, and I went down for the interview, and I think this was kind of their plan. So Jacob Druckmann was really effusive and very nice and just like, oh, and he said, say hello to your dad and blah, blah, blah. And then he said, I have to leave for a few minutes. So, excuse me, right? So he left. And so then it was just Marty there. And he doesn't remember this, but I remember this. He said, oh, okay, we'll go to the piano. Right. So I go to the piano and I'm thinking to myself, I'm not a pianist either. I play trumpet, right? But I didn't say anything. I said, okay. And he said, so he just started just saying, okay, modulate from C to F sharp in the fastest way possible. Now, I could have just played C and then F sharp and just walked away, right? But I tried really hard to try to be real clever with the progression and, and try to improvise it in 4 parts, and not make any mistakes. And I sort of fumbled my way through it. And then he goes, okay, so explain the importance of the arch form in Bartok's 4-string quartet. I mean, he just started hitting me with doctoral level kind of questions, you got to know. And I was just nervous and I bumbled my way through it. And then Jacob walks back in and is just like, oh, it's all great and happy and just say hello to your dad and shakes my hand and leaves. And they did accept me, but I had already decided to go to Michigan for that. But those interviews are kind of meant, I think, sometimes to, just depending on who, I think it depends on the makeup of the faculty, but sometimes those interviews are kind of meant to see how you do under pressure. But my God, being able to play a Beethoven was some kind of piano sonata they just randomly picked and just, I mean, that had to be really just nerve-wracking for you.
Yeah.
What is this? I don't know how to do this. All right, let's play some music. So I have, as you know, I've got some stuff that's queued up. Is there anything you think we should roll with first? We've got.
Well, you're gonna play things from YouTube, right? That way they'll have the scores scrolling.
Exactly. Yeah.
Why don't you play something recent? The Nico String Quartet, first movement.
Okay. All right. See it? Yep, I got it. Absolutely. So, do you want to set this up a little bit for the folks, as sort of a little background?
All right, Nico is actually a name of the honor string quartet at New England Conservatory in 2019.
Mm-hmm.
I had what I've been doing. Maybe I should do a quick summation of what I've been doing recently.
Mm-hmm.
I am now 75 years old. So at the age of 70, as everybody knows, you better start collecting your Social Security checks. So since I'm still teaching full-time, getting a full salary from, well, not that much, but
right.
I am on full salary teaching at Boston College. And so my idea of the Social Security checks, which is substantial, is what I'm using these days to fund recordings of my music in the studio.
Mm-hmm.
So all the pieces you're going to hear have been recorded in the studio. So Nico is a honor string quartet at New England Conservatory, and I had a what I called a Missa Pro Defunctis. It's like a requiem.
Yeah.
So Mass for the Dead. So it requires a chamber orchestra and a SATB chorus. So through friends I know at NEC, I hired a bunch of string players and a flute player and clarinet and a harp. And the string quartet was actually part of the Nico Quartet, the honors group. And I loved the way they play so much that I've actually been, so I said, I should write you guys a quartet. They said, oh, we love it. And I said, I'm going to name it after you guys. They said, oh, I love it even more. Anyway, so this is the Nico Quartet at NEC. The violinist is Japanese.
Mm-hmm.
The second violinist is from Korea. The violist is from Taiwan, and the cello is also from Korea. So it's like an all Asian group. It's not the point where you look at any student orchestra, right? It's
right.
2/3 Asian players.
Right.
Anyway, so it's a very they play beautifully. And anyway, I wrote this thing for them. I write so much music. I even forgot how many movements there are in this piece, but it's several movements.
Several movements.
Yeah, several.
Okay,
So this is the first movement.
Okay, it was the first movement. Okay, well, let's check this out. I will cue it up, and we'll meet back up after we take a listen. Okay. Beautiful, man.
Thanks. That's
Um,
my 13th string quartet.
13 quartets. You just got 2 more to go. Actually,
I
3 more,
know.
and you'll get
Beethoven.
you get Beethoven and Shostakovich,
Shostakovich.
right?
I plan to. That's my goal.
Um, we were talking a little bit about this in the pregame
Right.
show, if you
Right.
will.
Yeah.
But also, we've talked about this before informally, not
Right.
as part of a show like this. But is this idea of prolificness and writing, and you've even alluded to before, and we do want to talk a little bit about the music, and I want to see we get some comments too.
Right.
Um, you, you tipped your hand on your philosophy. Just do it, right? Kind of like as an improviser, you can't
Yeah.
sort of lay
Improvise.
out and think about what you're going to play in the next chorus, right?
Right.
So this is translated for you in terms of composing. Was it always this way, or in terms of, or has your facility as a composer grown with say your shedding, if you will, as a composer and
Well,
getting
I definitely think in the beginning, the jazz improvising, jazz improvising, drink some water. My fluency as an improviser made it kind of easy for me to be composing.
Mm-hmm.
All right. But I think I mentioned to you that I think finally when I turned 65, I think I finally found my voice.
Mm-hmm.
So, and 65, and I think I mentioned to you in an email that how does one know that you found your voice, right?
Yeah,
That's also a big question,
it
right?
is.
It
Yeah.
is. So as I said, starting from starting from when I 2010, that's when I turned 65. I started taking my music into the studio,
Mm-hmm.
and I got better funding after I turned 70 because of
Because of
Social
the social
Security.
security you mentioned
Yeah.
earlier, yeah.
So what happened is um, things I wrote before, they were good. I think, and I mentioned to you, I started using a baseball batting average as a way to define whether something's good or not. So on an annual basis, I started looking back of all my output.
Uh-huh.
I've noticed that before I was 65, my batting average per year
Mm-hmm.
is from 0 to 500. 0 to 500.
Okay.
All right, really bad. So
Yeah, like in
if
other
I wrote,
words, the
yeah, if
0
I,
year was like
yeah,
you went 0 for 4.
yeah, 0 for 4, right, exactly. So, but then after 2010, my
Uh-huh.
average started going up. It
Yeah.
started around 600.
Yeah.
Since 2017, it's been 1,000. Now, how do I decide why this is 1,000 and 600?
Versus right.
Right. And my criteria is this: since these recording projects come from pocket,
Yeah.
I'm paying this. I'm not getting any grants from Boston College or anything.
Right.
This is all totally self-funded.
Yeah.
So if I think a piece of work is worth recording, I will spend the money. If it's not, I'll just let it sit, sit in
Somewhere.
on
Yeah.
the
Right.
shelf. Yeah.
Right.
So I have recorded things before 2010,
Mm-hmm.
but that's when the average came in. Like certain years, there was 0, meaning all the pieces I wrote that year, it's not worth recording.
Right.
And every once in a while,
Right.
let's say out of 4 pieces, I recorded 2. That's
Mm-hmm.
my 500.
Mm-hmm.
But after 2010, I would start, let's say out of 6 pieces, I would record 4 of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
But starting 2017, I just started everything like this year, thanks to the pandemic, I've written 10 works.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all going to the studio. As a matter of fact, I've got all these pieces lined up in the studio,
ready to go.
really reserved,
Yeah.
studio time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So since for the last 3 or 4 years, everything I've written, I felt was good enough to be recorded. So
that's
and Nico's 2019,
yeah.
that's one of them. And anyway.
Yeah, I want to let's see if we have to check the comments, the comments section, if you will, and see what we got going on here. Yeah, so Tony Landman said that was beautiful. If you could go back in time and show this to your 1973 self, what do you think your younger self would say about it?
Me?
Yeah.
You mean 1973 when I first
in other words, if you could take what we just played and show it to your 73 Tom Lee, what do you think?
You know what? That's a very good question. Just my gut response is that in 1973, I didn't know what the hell I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how I would be able to judge that.
Yeah.
Because I remember in 1973, I was still in graduate school. And one of the dangers of graduate school is that your teacher has kind of brainwashed you to think that 12-tone music is where you should go. Like when I was with Donald Martino.
Oh, with Don, right.
You know, so it was a different world.
Mm-hmm.
Composers were expected to be pushing the envelope.
Yeah.
So how would I have thought about that? I really have no idea.
Yeah.
First of all, I don't think even in 1970, when I was 73, that was what, in the mid 70s, I think.
Yeah.
No, that was I was in my 20s.
Yeah.
So I was in my late 20s.
You would have been 28.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, 28. So yeah, that's a tough question.
Yeah. Yeah.
Put it this way, I think that question is kind of here's the thing. By the time I wrote Nico that you just heard,
mm-hmm.
this is like let me look it up. Now that I'm curious. And I gotta look this up. Yeah, give me a second. It's
oh yeah, no.
I'll be with you. Okay. I just want to
a little. This is we don't have a staff doing research.
Yeah, research.
This is I make the guests do their own research.
Right. All right. This work was Opus 194.
194. Okay, so
Opus
1 was the piece that you wrote for Gunther in like the string quartet number 1, right?
String quartet, and that I dated at 1974.
Okay.
At string quartet.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that string quartet used 12-tone rows,
mm-hmm.
right? And I was inspired by Carter's second string quartet. It
mm-hmm.
even starts out with a cello solo.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, Opus 1, like I said, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. So
mm-hmm.
to compare Opus 1 with 194, it's like
light years.
Apples and oranges.
Yeah, right. I want to play. I do have some questions, but before I ask those questions, I want to play one more piece so we can get another version of your sound.
Okay.
And then I do have some questions about the process, your process, and what you value, and this sort of thing. We have a bunch of pieces on the slate.
Okay, you know what? Let me play something that was very lyrical and kind of adagio.
Yeah.
Let me play something faster that is give a little other perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't we do the Concertino per violino e 16 strumenti?
Okay.
It's a third movement, vivace.
All right, I'm going.
And if you scroll down the YouTube,
yeah,
there's a bookmark.
There's a bookmark for the third movement. Exactly.
So hit the third movement.
Okay. All right. So I'm gonna cue this up for the crowd, and we will meet up after we hear this. It's hard to ask a question like this. I know composers usually hate answering these kinds of questions, but this is kind of an example of your sort of fast music style, late fast music style.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Vivace stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And also the tonality is not as quote unquote tonal as the Nico thing that you just heard.
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
know? It's a little bit more like augmented triad type of harmonies.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
chords in fourth, that kind of stuff. You know, chords in kind of like tritone, perfect fourth type of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, this piece was inspired by the similar instrumentation of Kurt Weill's violin concerto with
Okay.
winds. He used 4 double basses. I
Okay.
used 2.
Okay.
And he has a larger percussion section. And
Mm-hmm.
but I heard the performance of it at Boko of the Kurt Weill, and I said, "Wow, that's a cool instrumentation.
Right.
I'll write one too."
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. No, it's kind of it. I like the instrumentation. It's having winds pitted against basically smaller string structure really brings out the strings. I mean, you could think of it to one of two ways. If you have a string orchestra with a string soloist, it amplifies kind of the stringness of things. But the opposite gives you that sort of textural color change.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm going to see if we have any comments
Sure.
from the folks watching. And we might actually have some comments. Let's see. Tony Landman said, I make the guests do their own research. You've discovered the secret to one track. Okay, yeah, thanks, man. So I was going to ask you this question about being prolific and sort of your approach to composition, kind of related to this thing about being an improviser and so on and so forth. So, do you find any value at all in looking at older pieces of music and doing any sort of extensive revisions, or are you just sort of keep going?
You mean my older music of my own?
Yeah, of your own.
Oh, no. I move forward.
You move forward. Yeah.
Forward. And also, I actually don't have a trajectory as to my language evolving.
Mm-hmm.
I just sort of go with the flow. In that sense, it's coming from an improviser's point of view.
Right.
I sort of take what's presented to me.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I could mention, and I think some people would find it kind of what's the word? Would find it blasphemous, maybe. I listen to a lot of music. My day is filled with listening to. I'm an Amazon Prime Music Unlimited subscriber,
Mm-hmm.
and I just like recently I've been listening to Franz Liszt. There's this 34 CD box that is no longer available physically.
Yeah.
But it's on Amazon and it's free.
Mm-hmm.
And I get to listen to Franz Liszt from his, flamboyant,
Style,
Playboy style, the
yeah.
flashy virtuoso style,
Right.
to the point where he became a Catholic not a priest, but he became a monk of sorts.
Yeah.
And he started writing a lot of religious music. So as a matter of fact, one of his later works is called Via Crucis. It's for chorus and piano or organ. And Reinbert Deluve recently is on YouTube, but he recently died. But on YouTube, he played a piano version of Via Crucis. So what I find inspiration is listening to other people's music and say, wow, that's a great idea. I'm going to steal that.
Right. Right. Of course. Right. That's
Yeah.
what composers do, right? It's like, oh,
Well,
that's
and
cool.
also, yeah, and also jazz musicians do that all the time.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
not a big deal, you know.
Right.
People come out, they say, "Oh my God, I love Coltrane. I'm going to sound like him." That's fine. But in classical work, people have a kind of phobia about that.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
If you find Elliott Carter inspiring, well, write something in his style, but ultimately comes out in your own voice because you are who you are.
Right.
It's not going to come out like Carter. It's not going to
No,
come
it
out
never,
like,
and it never will. I mean, I think a lot of times people make a lot of hay over like statements like that.
yeah.
But that's not, that's how you learn.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm still learning. I'm 75 and I'm still learning, you know?
Right.
So that's why, like, this Kurt Weill thing, I heard him do that and I said, wow, that was an inspiration. But of course, if you listen to the music, it doesn't sound at all like the Kurt Weill piece.
Yeah, right.
But
Right.
Kurt Weill gave me the seed.
Right.
And from there, it blossomed into my own voice.
Right. Into what you wanted to do.
Right.
So
my answer to being prolific is that I listen to a lot of music. Music's a major part of my life. I'm surrounded by it constantly. And then when I hear something inspiring, I say, oh, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that because I was inspired by somebody else's work.
Right. I think, and I say this to my students, that being a composer, 95% of being a composer is being a listener.
Yes.
The other 5% is, all the craft and blah, 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 right? It's like everything. But the 95% of that is listening, right?
Yeah.
And I find myself, when I listen to a lot of music that's being written today by composers, this is not targeting specific generations or whatever. I mean, I say the younger generation, I mean, the 30 somethings or whatever. But I do find myself, like feeling like I'm eating food that has no substance. And this isn't true with everybody, and it isn't true with every composer's work of particular thing, but there's something, and my point I'm trying to make is actually, I think, related to listening, which you said, is if you haven't done enough listening, and have that internal reflection as a listener, and develop your ear, which actually, I think in your case, and in my case to a more limited extent, being around jazz, you have to have a good ear to play jazz well, right? And you have to be able to hear things. You have to be able to hear harmony. You have to be able to hear these things. I think there are a lot of composers who write music and they're not hearing what they're writing. They're not there. It's what I call finger music. It's out here somewhere, and it's not coming from a heard spot. And I never get that feeling with your music. With your music, I always feel like the ear is in control, right? Whether you're writing fast or slow, that's just a matter of engine, if you will. But the stuff that's underneath is really what's important. And to me, if I'm not hearing that, kind of well-heardness in a piece, I feel very undernourished, if you will. I don't know what you could say about, or what your thoughts are on that, especially as a teacher.
Well, what you said is very, very insightful, about listening, because ultimately, as you know yourself, a composer, when you're composing, you're editing yourself over and over again
Mm-hmm.
before you finally say, all right, now it is in the shape or form that I want.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of listening to yourself,
Right.
to the notes you write,
Right.
because sometimes you might have a great morning and you wrote something great. Then the next day you listen to it, says, man, that sucked.
Yeah,
Then
well,
you end up having to revise it again.
right. I'm not going to eat oatmeal anymore.
Right. Yeah.
That didn't
So,
help. Yeah.
right. So the act of composing is a lot about revising
Yeah.
and editing.
Yeah.
And you do that from listening to yourself
Mm-hmm.
over and over again until you finally say, now I found the key
Yeah.
to that movement,
Yeah.
found the key to that passage,
Yeah.
found the right rhythmic
Just
pattern.
just what needed to be there, right?
Right.
It's ultimately what needs to be there. Yeah.
There's so much tinkering involved composing.
Oh yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
what you're saying. That it's all
Yeah.
about listening to yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. And being honest.
Yeah.
Because
Oh yeah.
because you have to be honest with yourself and admit to yourself that sucked,
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And
Uh,
you keep fighting it until it is right. And sometimes you have bad weeks.
it's sometimes you just don't get it right.
Right.
There's just like, like you said, you bat 500. So you get
Yeah.
some things it's like, man, I thought it was okay at the time,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
maybe,
Well, the other thing I've found, and this has been helpful for me,
mhm.
is that when I'm having a bad day, I just walk away from it.
Yeah.
Don't hit yourself with a hammer,
Yeah. Yeah.
I just walk away. And usually the next day when I go back, I say, oh, it opened up.
Right. Right. The thing that I was really frustrated with
Right.
suddenly now no longer seems like such a big problem.
Next
Right.
day.
Yeah. And that's a good tactic. And it's a good thing to, when we teach young composers these little tricks, right? Don't do as I did,
Right.
um, yeah, I also I think I want to before we sort of wrap things up, I want to play one more thing at
Right.
least. But uh, the idea of when you said you sort of found, if you will, your rhythm, your voice.
Yeah.
Um, what was that? What was that like? Was that sort of an epiphany, or was it just sort of a gradual, like say putting on a comfortable shoe and suddenly you realize that, hey, this shoe just
Gradual.
fits? Yeah.
Gradual.
Yeah.
And as I said, my criteria is that if I want to spend money on it, then it has to be worth it,
Right.
because I don't want to spend money on a piece of crap.
Right. Right. You can always give me the money, man.
Yeah.
I'll happily spend your money on my crap. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's check something else. Let's check another piece out, and
Okay,
hopefully
great.
this time I'll have the right link
Okay,
and
so
everything queued up.
the next thing I want to play is my Keith Jarrett piece,
Okay, that I do have queued up. Yeah.
Piano Trio number 3.
Yeah.
First movement.
Great. Do you want to set this up at all? I mean, obviously it's got the name of one of our great artists.
Yeah, it's very sad what happened to him
I
recently.
know, man. I know.
He had this heart attack.
Did you
But
see you obviously before you set this up, you've seen Keith play. Like, do you ever see him play solo?
I've only seen him with his trio.
Okay.
I've never seen him solo.
Mm-hmm.
But let me tell you, I own all his records.
Mm-hmm.
I think his Sun Bear concerts is a masterpiece.
Mm-hmm.
That thing, I can listen to it. It's like my desert island.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I love all his other stuff too, but that one, that's an amazing piece. And he was very young then.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so I'm a huge Keith Jarrett fan. So these pieces, I don't know, I don't remember how many movements my music is.
Do your own research.
Yeah, yeah, I can't keep track. Anyway, so what I did is I stole some of his grooves.
Okay.
And I made it into a piano trio, classical piano trio format. But you're gonna hear some of the grooves that you say, oh yeah, that's something Keith would do.
Okay. Nice. Cool. All right, well, let's check this out, and then we'll meet up to talk about it, maybe field some questions, and yeah, cool. So here it is. I'll switch over to the music view, and we'll meet up in a few minutes.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, man. So I could certainly hear the, some of the Keith-ish gestures.
Right, right, exactly.
Yeah. Um, uh, did you think about this for a while, or I mean, you went into writing the piece knowing right away that you wanted to do a sort of a tribute or homage to Keith
Yeah,
Jarrett?
yeah, yeah. This is for a group in Boston called the Boston Trio.
Mm-hmm.
And Irina, the violinist, I've written several things. I wrote a violin concerto for her. I've written a solo partita for her.
Mm-hmm.
And so she became a member of this group. And I said, oh, I should write you guys a piece. And they said, great. So Keith Jarrett, the idea came, well, I'll just do a Keith Jarrett piece. That's it.
Just came in and then you did
Right.
it, right?
Yeah,
Right?
they didn't ask for a Keith Jarrett piece. They just want a piano trio.
Right.
I
Right.
just said, oh, it's time to do a Keith Jarrett tribute.
It's time. It's time. It's yeah.
Yeah.
Um, uh, so obviously, then your internalization again of all of that great stuff that Keith recorded was that talk about listening, right? That's in your
Yeah,
ear, right? That's in your library,
right, exactly.
right? And then but it comes out as Tom Lee
Yeah, right.
and not as so you're
Yeah,
not writing
right.
Keith Jarrett, right?
I'm not transcribing Keith Jarrett.
Right, exactly, right. Some solos or
Yeah,
whatever the case may be. Let me switch over and see if we have any if we have any comments. Yeah. Let's see. We have don't have any comments right now. I do have Tony had said something and it's related, but not directly about the piece. So you mentioned recording. Before I let you go, there's just a couple more things that I wanted to ask you about. One is, you know, have you discovered the value of recording in terms of has recording your music made you a better composer in the sense that you always have a good performance of your music, and in terms of that sort of reflective process, or does it not matter?
No, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
The reason I want to record it is thanks to digital technology.
Mm-hmm.
One of the frustrations I have as a composer is that live performance on my music is cursed by Murphy's Law.
Yeah.
So I get very frustrated when I go to a concert of my music. I come away depressed.
Yeah.
Because they did the wrong tempo, you know,
Right.
this thing and that thing. And then I also feel that the audience is not served the right product.
Mm-hmm.
Because if they heard something in the wrong tempo, the piece is
not the right thing. It's not what you wrote.
Not the right thing. Yeah, it's not the right thing.
Right.
So, but in the studio, I can control that. You know, in the studio, I can say, "Oh, stop, metronome. Please turn on the metronome.
Yeah.
Let's keep it in tempo."
Mm-hmm.
And you know, you do 2 or 3 takes, and then afterwards, you can select the best take in terms of intonation,
right,
in terms of whatever. You know,
right.
I mean, even then, the recordings are not
perfect. Right.
But they're 1,000 times better than a live performance.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's why I'm spending a lot of money, you know, and I pay my musicians very good money. I'm not, you know, taking advantage of them. Like even the students at NEC, I pay them, you know, professional fees.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And the other thing is, and also I hire people who are professional in their mentality. They come prepared. There's no, you know, one time I had to fire somebody because she did not know her notes.
Oh man. Well, that's
yeah.
That's like you know, professionalism 101, right? You don't do that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
No, it's actually a good point you make, and maybe I don't know what your advice to your young student composers are, but I've had my fair share of terrible performances by and really almost in some cases through no fault of sometimes the performers, or sometimes you write music for people you genuinely care about as human beings, but for whatever reason, you know, they don't have enough time, or something goes wrong in the performance, like somebody's pages fall on the floor. I mean, you like, right? So, and the other thing that you and I, you know, and today, composers today, we don't have the luxury or the advantage of having a band, you know, like a string quartet, for example, play your piece 50 times.
No.
So, I mean, if that was the case, then maybe by the 50th time, the piece will probably be, you know, they're playing it from memory and it sounds, you know, they're playing it in a way that you probably hadn't even imagined.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's why when you go to a concert, you know, they're playing Beethoven. That's something they've been playing for the last 30 years.
Right. They've played it. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Of course, can they play Beethoven well, but can they play McKinley and Lee well? No.
No, because they never have enough time. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
That's why I need to go into the studio, and post-production solves a lot of problems.
Right. Right. What do you have? Do you dispense any like advice, certain terms for your young composers, or you know, those who are going on, like in terms of the just that very benefit of, like, you know, hey man, you should probably, I know right now you don't have the bread, but maybe when you do, you should really think about, you know, recording more of your stuff.
Well, they say to me, yeah, when I reach 70s, then
I can draw social. Right. Yeah. I know. It's like, where's the money tree? I keep planting them in the backyard. I don't know what's going on, right? Oh, yeah, actually, that's one of the. It's funny because my old man had the same kind of feeling about recording, and that's one of the reasons why I asked, is because he liked recording because he could hear everything,
Yeah.
and he could hear everything, and he could hear it the way that it should be played.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And you get there a lot faster, but you do have to invest, the money in that. And if you get obviously it's going to be great. You're not going to turn down if a piano trio says, we want to play your piece.
That's fine. Go ahead.
Right. But it's not going to be something that you're going to, put all your marbles into, like, oh, this is my one performance of this piece. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. What are you working on now, man?
I'm writing another piece for soprano and string quartet.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah.
You shared some. We didn't get a chance to play that, but you shared something with me. I think it was last year that you had written. Yeah. Right. Is this connected in any way or just a new project?
Just a new project.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's a text by Charles Baudelaire.
Yep.
Les fleurs du mal, the flowers of evil.
Well, take that with your morning coffee, right? Yeah. Yeah.
The flowers of evil.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you'll have it done by Christmas.
Yes. Oh yeah. Yeah.
And on to the next.
Into the studio.
And then into the studio. Yeah.
No live recording.
Well, we hope that that 2021 can sort of bring a somewhat different result for everybody in terms of more stuff, right? More projects. But so if there are any comments for Tom and you're watching this not live, please make the comments. We'll try to answer. If you have questions for Tom, I can always pass them on to him. I will leave links in the description section of the videos for where you can find some of this music and some of the YouTube links as well. And hopefully, if you have an aspiring piano trio or a string quartet, Tom has a lot of music for you. So, I'll leave the link and where they can find the music, right? Tom,
right.
This was really great to catch up with you for the last couple hours and share with our small but dedicated audience some of your music. I tell this to all of my guests that this is one of those COVID sort of projects. I never thought I'd end up doing this. You asked me a year ago, I'd be interviewing composers as part of a live web show. I would be saying, you're out of your mind. I'm not going to do that. But I plan on eventually having everybody back for kind of a Where Are They Now kind of segment. We'll play the latest track, right? And to catch up a bit. So, and maybe my production values will even be better, I do have a green screen that I haven't hauled out, so I can be in the music, kind of, virtually. But man, this was really, really terrific to have you on, right. And really lovely to hear some of your latest tunes. You have so many things that I haven't heard all of this music. I hear some of it, but I haven't heard all of it. So
there's just too much of it.
There's just too much. Will that become a new trend, a trending hashtag? Hashtag too much Lee?
Yeah, too much. Too much. Stop composing.
Yeah, hashtag stop composing. Yeah. They'll say that to both of us, man.
I know.
Yeah. Anyway. All right, okay. Man, thank you so much. All right.
Pleasure.
And we'll see you. Yeah.
Hopefully after this thing is over, we can meet for dinner.
Yeah. I would love that. I haven't mentioned this, of course, since you've been to Italy, you are a lover of all things Italian.
Right.
Exactly. And actually quite a I would say an accomplished chef when it comes to Italian cuisine.
Thank you.
So that's always a pleasure. So
yeah. And if people want to see my food, they're on my Instagram.
Ah, there we go. I maybe leave a link for that. So food porn on Instagram.
Yeah, exactly.
Courtesy of Tom Lee.
Yeah.
So, all right, man. Thank you.
Thank you. Talk later.
And let's see, we'll go me at end here, switch over. We're going to be meeting in 2 weeks with composer Jared Tate. And there it is. I'll do the little promo slide here. There it is, Jared. I hope to have you join us then. And also, I will say, give us a subscription like. There we go, the little clicky sign there. And like us over on Facebook. And until then, I hope all of you have a wonderful and safe rest of your night and the next couple of weeks, and whatever the outcome of our current political situation is. Let's hope that everything gets to something of a level of normalcy. Please practice responsible and safe social distancing, and I will see you in a few weeks. Thank you very much.